I'm excited about today's webinar titled Building a Culture of Care, which will examine how farms, plants, and other businesses ensure that animal care is a core value and component to their company's culture. This discussion will be moderated by Dr. Michelle Calvo-Lorenzo, Chief Animal Welfare Officer at Elanco Animal Health. Dr. Calvo-Lorenzo's bio, as well as all of our full speaker bios, are available on the Virtual Summit website, and we'll drop that link in the chat box as well. With that, I will turn things over to Dr. Calvo-Lorenzo. Thank you very much.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Very, very honored and excited to be here to discuss with our panel this topic called Building a Culture of Care. But first, would like to again thank you, Hannah, and to the Animal Ag Alliance and all of the sponsors for hosting this virtual summit. I've attended all the pre-conference webinars and just thoroughly have enjoyed them and really appreciate the small distraction from the craziness of today's current circumstances. And with that, I also hope that all the viewers and listeners out there are safe and finding all the resources they need to overcome and survive these extreme COVID circumstances we're living through today. Again, we're all in this together, and I hope we can continue to lean on one another as an industry, as a medical and scientific community, and also as a society. So, to get back to the topic of today's panel, very excited that we have three wonderful speakers to speak on a very important topic that I know is very, very important and strongly tied to animal welfare. As Hannah mentioned, there was a wonderful webinar yesterday that talked about the scientific tools and scientific strategies in measuring and understanding animal welfare. So when we typically think about animal welfare, we usually think through the lens of the animals. So we're typically very animal centered in our approaches. But today, our panel is actually going to talk about a different and kind of indirect approach to optimizing animal welfare. And that's by looking at the people dimension of animal welfare. And by that, what I mean is we're going to be looking through the lens of the caretakers, those folks that tend to animals, livestock, and poultry day in and day out. And this is a very important aspect of animal welfare that our industries need to continue considering and developing strategies for, because when we think about the very basics of these livestock animals, they're domesticated animals, which really rely on their human caretakers for all of their needs and their wants. And so it's important that as we think about all of the new strategies out there to really optimize animal welfare, and there's many new ones out there, but we got to think and take into consideration the people aspect of this. And so it's important to think about things like empowering our caretakers, removing barriers and challenges, establishing positive workplace cultures or a culture of care like we're talking about today, and find ways that we can continue to boost employee morale and satisfaction, because it truly is a win-win-win when you have employees that feel empowered, confident, and content in what they do every day on the farm. It builds a wonderful human-animal interaction or bond between that caretaker and the animals they tend. And ultimately, it leads to optimized animal welfare outcomes, all of which we are trying to advance every single day to enhance the quality of life for the animals and for their caretakers, right? So just wanted to set the stage and just make, again, our audience realize that animal welfare is very complex, and sometimes it can be optimized with strategies that take our four-legged friends into consideration, but sometimes we got to think about our two-legged friends as well, right? So with that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our panel of wonderful speakers. We've got three fantastic speakers for you today. Today, we're first going to speak with or hear from Dr. Robert Hagefort, who's an extension dairy specialist and associate professor at New Mexico State University. And so Dr. Hagefort works individually with dairies and collectively with producer associations on implementing and evaluating comprehensive workforce training programs in dairy safety, animal handling, parlor performance, calf care, feeder performance, and hospital and maternity care. Our next panelist is going to be Max Ursic, who's the bull market president and manager at Keiko Isom. Having operated his family's farm and cow operations, Ursic brings firsthand knowledge of the daily issues which farm and ranch operations face. In his role, he utilizes his specialization in livestock as well as row crop operations to help clients successfully optimize, expand, and transition their agribusinesses. And last but not certainly least is Josh Lind, who's a pig farmer and general manager in the Heartland region with the mash-offs. Lind has a passion for raising pigs that goes back to when he was growing up on the family farm. He joined the mash-offs in 2009, and in 2017, he was promoted to general manager of the Heartland region, which finishes approximately 1.6 million market hogs annually. So with that, folks, those are three fantastic speakers today. So we'll go ahead and turn it over to our first panelist, Dr. Hagefort. If you can share your screen, I'll go ahead and turn the stage over to you.
Yes, good morning. My name is Robert Hagefort, Dairy Extension Specialist with New Mexico State University. And I'm just going to go ahead and get my screen shared and the presentation going. Assuming that everybody can see what the presentation that's in front of us. Talking more about this building a culture of care. We've heard that being utilized probably in the last year or two many, many times. And the interesting thing about that phrase is a lot of times when we talk about animal welfare, animal well-being, and I use these words a little bit intermittently, and we almost talk about this as an abstract concept, as something that we either decide we're going to do or we're not going to do, we're going to adhere to, we're going to sign up for, we're going to embrace as something that we decide we're going to do, as if it were to live in a vacuum. However, when we think about this a little bit more, it does not. It is not something you decide. It is, and as a matter of fact, it is an outcome of a interaction between a human and an animal. Because these animals live and we take care of them, they live on our farms. Ultimately, it is us that provide that and entertain that interaction. And so it's an outcome. It is not an abstract process or concept. It's something that is an outcome of a process in which involves both a human and an animal. So first piece to that equation is the animal component, and we've, as far as cattle is concerned, dairy breeds, we've domesticated those now about 10,000 years ago, selecting for acceptable temperament, animals that we can work with, that we can have around us without us being getting hurt by a large animal. The animal has its innate behavior despite domestication, its natural instinct, as we refer to. And on top of that, there's a learned behavior. The interaction that they've had during their lifetime with us is what they have learned to be either good or bad. They have experiences and they interpret those experiences. So what we see is both a combination of the innate behavior and the learned behavior. Secondly, there is that human component, that person that's actually taking care of that animal. I have an iceberg in this slide. Why? Because there's a portion of the human that we can see, the interaction that we actually see how the person behaves in him or herself around us or around the animals. The combined effect of their knowledge and their skill set that they've learned over time. But there's a much bigger part underneath there that we really don't know a whole lot about, which is their attitude and their character, which is very difficult to change. What we can change in that human is, of course, their knowledge and their skill set, the understanding, comprehension, and awareness, what we have learned so far through experience, in this case, working with animals. Then we develop a skill set, ability, expertise, mastery, capability, which is coming from one's knowledge. Those are the things that we can impact as managers, owners, working with people that work on our farms. The part that we may have a little harder time with is the attitude and the character, disposition, viewpoint, frame of mind. It is what we bring to the job. It is who we are. So if we talk about the reality on dairy farms today, one, dairies are larger in terms of numbers of cows, and that is a worldwide trend. Larger dairies, of course, employ many more people. Approximately 1 employee per 100 cows, and that number is rapidly increasing as well. Employees are not just family labor anymore. In many cases, it's hired labor, and they are nowadays usually from a different or cultural, linguistic background, foreign-born labor as we refer to it. Employment is often not based on skills. It is oftentimes based on the willingness to perform a task. We really don't know or have very limited or unknown understanding about the education and training, especially with the workers that come to the job for the first time. Of course, if they've worked for us for a longer time, we may know a whole lot more, but a lot of times we really don't know what kind of training, what kind of education pertaining to animal handling or pertaining to agricultural safety that these people may have had or may bring. So they may not be familiar working with and around large herding animals or large equipment. So in that sense, we have an industry that is in transition from a family-owned and operated endeavor to a much larger company with a lot of employees. And we have very little performance metrics pertaining to our workforce. Many for cows, not so many for our workforce. So the question really is, how does the level of knowledge about large herding animals affects the person's animal handling skills? And as an outcome, their safety as they are working in that position, but also the well-being of those animals that they take care of. And so if we try to put that into a graph, which of course is what we do in science and in academia, we want graphs, we want to picture everything that we think about. And if we want to improve human well-being or human performance, I use that word also for that well-being, human performance, how can we train and educate these workers to where they can do a better job or better understand what it is that they're doing or the why of what it is that they're doing? We know there is a relationship to the animal well-being. However, we don't know if that is actually, as it is depicted here, a linear relationship or not. So if I improve their understanding of working with animals twofold, does that mean that the animal well-being and performance then also improves twofold? We really don't know that. What we do know that, and this is from a lot of dairy safety training, that awareness training that we've done, is a couple of things when it comes to our employees. And here are some numbers that I want to share with you. So here, they're taking about 1,400 employees that we've got data on that did these safety awareness training on dairies throughout the US. This is not just in our state, New Mexico, but it's throughout the US. We know that as far as their position is concerned, about a third of them were milkers, about 5% feeders, and then the rest was general workers, caretakers of calves on the farm, all kind of other positions on the dairy. Years of experience, about 7.5 years, plus or minus 9. The interesting part here in blue is that we're dealing with a population that has a limited level of education coming to the job. As you can see there, about 60% has a 5th grade level education or below. So what we do in terms of training has to be targeted to that group of employees. When we talk about their country of origin, if I would have done this study, say 5 or 10 years ago, I probably would have found that about 80 or 90% of our employees would have come from Mexico. One thing that we're starting to see, and that's indicated here in blue, that about 1/3 of our workforce is no longer coming from Mexico, but from Central America. And that has implications, and we'll talk about that in a minute. For one of the implications is that the language tends to change. What we have found is, and 22.4% of the employees, their native language is Quiche, a Mayan language out of Central America, one of the 23 Mayan languages that are there in Central America, and in the primary language in which a lot of the Central Americans communicate amongst themselves. A lot of those native Quiche speakers may not speak Spanish. If they've not gone to school in their country of origin, they may not have learned Spanish as a language. So that creates issues when we're dealing with these employees in terms of training and educating on the farm. What we've learned is that the large majority of the employees no longer is coming from an ag background. The large majority has no experience in working with large animals or equipment. As I said, about 60% of the employees has a 5th grade level education or below. There's a very high level of illiteracy or low reading comprehension amongst those employees, and that has nothing to do with age. We've seen that in very young employees as well. There's a very high level of labor turnover on these dairies, especially in the first 6 to 12 months. And there is a shift going on in a typical workforce makeup to now more Central Americans, which means a different culture that is added to the mix. Besides the Anglo culture now and the Hispanic culture, we also now have the Mayan or the indigenous culture. We've added a language to the mix. Besides English and Spanish, we have now Quiche added to the mix. And we've also added another body stature or build for most of these people from Central America to the mix. This is an example of that. This is in a parlor where on the left picture you can see 2 employees. One a Hispanic worker who is working, milking cows, attaching machines pretty much right in front of him with not, right in his wheelhouse, so to speak. In the background, you can see another worker who is, as you follow the railing of the milking parlor where the cows are at, you can see he is much smaller in stature. He's from Central America. And of course, if you look at the person in the right picture, is that person up close. And as you can see, if he is when he is hanging machines, he is really not working in his wheelhouse. It's kind of extended to hang those machines and to push buttons. So the question really you need to ask yourself is which one of these 2 people in the theory would fatigue much quicker than the other? The person that's working within his wheelhouse or the person that has to reach up in order to hang machines? So this stature, body stature, has implications for how we need to design dairies, how we need to design parlors, how we need to design the workplace. Question I'm asking here is, this is a person breeding cows, behind the cows. He's in a parlor. He seems to be fairly comfortable. There's not much there that indicates that he is in not a pleasant environment, and there's no really reason to believe from this picture that he couldn't do his job really well. My question is, if that same person would be working here in minus 10, 20, or 30 with a snowstorm going on, is this person going to perform the same quality job or not? He might be a great breeder, but if he's working in these kind of conditions, or when it's 102 outside, which can happen here in New Mexico very easily, is he going to perform the same kind of job, the same quality job? So the question I'm asking is, we design typically dairies around cow comfort, and this is a class in cow comfort. Dr. Gordy Jones is in our industry probably considered the godfather of the term cow comfort. And these are some of those talking points about how we want to make sure that our cows are comfortable. We want to make that our MO, our modus operandi. The same question I can ask, are we doing this also for our employees? Do we design dairies around worker comfort? I still see dairies, for example, where the cows walk on rubber to make it comfortable to come to the parlor, yet milkers may still be standing on concrete. And so their poor performance is going to be impacted by that environment ergonomically to maximize worker performance. So what do all these things now mean in terms of animal welfare? Animal handling is much more an art than it is a task. As we've said before, it takes 2 to tango. Correct animal handling starts the day the animal is born and continues for a lifetime. It's not just something that is once in a while or maybe from 4 to 5 in the afternoon. It is a commitment that continues for a lifetime. Animal handling skills are learned slowly, by observing and practicing over and over again. That doesn't speak very well for those that come to a dairy and don't have that experience. It takes a long time to become a good animal handler. Given that animal handling is a skill set, the question really needs to be asked, what human personality traits does a cow handler need to possess? And that, of course, will then answer the question, did we select the right people for the job? So it's really important to go back and make sure that we hire the people that have the skill sets or that we can give the skill sets and practice with to do the right job. This is from personal experience. Dairies where handlers understand why they are doing what they are doing, the comprehension part. Cows are calmer, they're more curious, and they're less fearful of humans and human interactions. And every time when I do this presentation for producers and I talk about this, I get a lot of nodding heads. A lot of people will agree with this experience. So animal well-being really benefits if we teach and train employees on the skills and the knowledge, as I've said before. Those are the parts that we can hand to these people, that we can instill in our workers, and we can teach and train those. However, the part, and this is what takes certain teams to the Super Bowl or be winners, which is focusing on coaching. And that is really what we want to do as owners and managers. We want to coach attitudes. Attitudes, as we've said, are very difficult to change, but we want to coach and on these attitudes towards working with large animals. Things like motivation, confidence, integrity, honesty, enthusiasm, and commitment. Those are some of the attitudes that we want to coach for. Employees typically mean well, but if you can't anticipate what an animal is going to do, it's very easy to get frustrated, and frustration is the perfect setup for the wrong outcome and possible animal mishandling or abuse. I think that this is where we end up with some of those videos. Human well-being or safety concerns increase with the lack of understanding of what a 1,500-pound animal can do. Cows have great memories. They recognize people well, and they know real well who treats them well or not. It's something that sometimes we overlook. As we've said, learned behavior is an important component of that human-animal interaction equation. In conclusion, a culture of care begins by accepting that animal welfare doesn't live in a vacuum. It is the result of a correct or a mindful human-animal interaction, the two-legged animal in this equation, right? Which is a commitment. Ultimately, it starts at the top and it trickles down. It has to come from example. We have to set that at the top. It is the result of people interacting correctly with animals, understanding and anticipating how animals will respond to the pressure that we exert on them. It is jeopardized and compromised by misunderstanding herding behavior and cow senses. And those, of course, are the things that we want to teach and instill in our employees. And it is also jeopardized or compromised by incorrect human behavior around animals. It is an outcome. It's the positive outcome between a human and an animal. And so with that, thank you for your attention, and I will turn this back over to Michelle. Just one more thing, in my slides, there are 2 slides after this that have resources for producers. So those of you that may want to look for additional resources, there's 2 slides after this that will actually show those resources for you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Hagefort. I always appreciate your perspectives, and there's so many wonderful take-home messages from your slides, and I can't wait till we dig into that a little bit more when we get the Q&A going. So if we can get Josh up now so we can hear his perspectives. Go ahead and see if he can share his screen. I'm still tackling my technology issues, so I apologize to the audience, but hopefully you all can hear me okay and we can keep the conversation going. So Josh, I think you're on mute.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
There we go. Yeah, I can. Thanks so much. So
Excellent.
Josh, again, thanks for joining us today in this important conversation. You already heard some really great points by Dr. Hagefort. So really interested in hearing from you, from your perspective and from that of the Mash-Offs. How do you all instill a culture of care throughout the company? And Josh, why don't you also tell us how your role plays a part in that?
Sure. So at the Mash-Offs, we look at the culture of care as really everybody in the business's obligation to one another. And caring for the employees, caring for our animals is our top priority. So when we look through the individual roles and responsibilities in the company, me as a general manager, I look at the commitment to care is an employee first commitment to care, that we have to ensure that our employees are well cared for. They have a safe work environment, They fit well culturally with one another. They're trained on their jobs and their tasks on a daily basis to ensure the care of the animals. And so really we look at this as an individual basis too, that each person has a special set of skills and each person's unique in their own way. And so it's really working with individuals to find what skills they have and where we can apply those to be the most successful for them, to really thrive inside the environment in our farms. And then we also have a lot of people that, drive truck, work in feed mills and things of that nature. So that requires a different set of skills. So if we try to treat everybody as one and we have the same training program for everybody, we wouldn't be near as successful as we are. So finding those things, being very specific to the job, very specific to the individual. We have individual onboarding plans for people in the first 30, 60, 90, 120, and then continue out even past that. And not only is it onboarding plans for their day-to-day tasks, but also integrating them into the business and support divisions to where they can reach out for help, whether it's from nutritionists or our vets on staff, the HR department, accounting. And so it's kind of a holistic approach to just make sure that each individual can get what they need when they need it to be successful. And we think that's what the culture of the mash offs is. And if we have that for our people, by and large, that filters down to the animal care on farm, their husbandry skills. And then, our goal is to retain these people. And so through that type of structured onboarding, training, and coaching platform, retention is one of the key focuses to ensure that, we have the right people on a daily basis. And so again, going back to my specific role in the region I run, is we want to hire the right people for the right job and then promote a culture that gets them to be successful. And so also allowing them to have the ownership in decision-making to, have a positive outcome when they're working on projects or working on farm is extremely important to us as well. That allowing them, the bandwidth and the autonomy to make individual decisions, because every farm runs different. And so every farm's going to have its specific little niches. And so if we don't treat every farm as its own and kind of blanket the approach, we wouldn't have the success that we have. So I think that's one of the big keys at the mash offs is they've allowed that decision making to come out and down to the field level.
That's really great, Josh. And that just goes to show how there's lots of different approaches and strategies out there. And it sounds like what you all have going on really, really works. I'd like to ask you, so the Mash Offs owns about 80% of its sow farms, right? And there are critics out there that raise the concern that larger or corporate-owned farms don't value animal welfare. And clearly you just talked through how much animal welfare means to the Mash Offs. So what would you say to that notion by those critics?
Yeah, I would say they're wrong. And really, I think about this in two ways. As we have owners, the Mashoff family and leadership, Dr. Bradley Walters, Dr. Jay Miller, that have allowed the piece of ownership down to the farm level. So yes, we have the owners, but when we talk about the success and the farm level, where we operate in different states and different cultures, different communities, the ownership piece is what I really think is key to that is each individual farm, each individual person is responsible for the ownership. And so what's unique, I think, is the Mashoff family has trusted the employees with the ownership piece. So they've allowed individual farms, sow farms in particular, to really run their own P&L, their profit and loss statements. And so if you're part of that farm, you're also part of the outcome of that farm. And they've really fostered that type of mentality inside of the farm and production level that we trust and instilled in you guys the power to make the best decision to run that farm and to provide for yourselves, your families while doing that. And so I think that's extremely important to me as an employee. And I know the people that also work under me that they own the outcome. So we talk about the owners being the Mashoff family, but I feel as the employees, we have the ownership of our day-to-day obligation to the animals, to the performance of that farm. And that's one of the great things about the business too, is we're regionalized. So we have the commercial regions. We operate in different areas, so we know what those areas need, and we're able to make those decisions to provide the best outcome. And I think the other thing that really goes well with that is the farm level, you get to make your decisions from staffing, so getting the right culture of people to come there to work with you, the people that have the same values that you do on an individual farm basis. And then the other thing that I really like is we try to source the employees that are close together in same communities. So not only do you have the work life, but you also have a personal life outside of it that keeps you close together and continues to keep you, working towards a common goal.
That's great. Sounds like a model that's trying to account for on-farm considerations, but also off-farm. And obviously, right, our workers are humans like us, right? They all have on-farm and off-farm days, right? That may be on or off. But that's a wonderful explanation. And it just goes to show, again, there's lots of different resources and capabilities out there. And just because there's a larger scale operation or company doesn't necessarily mean that that's a bad thing, that can actually be a great thing in your case. So last question I've got for you, Josh. As Dr. Hagefort mentioned, animal welfare doesn't live in a vacuum. And when we think about the broader context and how animal welfare matters in the large scheme of things, it falls under this big sustainability umbrella, right? So a culture of care obviously isn't then going to be just focused on animal welfare or animal care. We also have to consider things like the environment, right? So how does the Mash-Offs ensure that the company is operating sustainably?
Sure. So I'd say one of the top things about our sustainability is we have an entire department, the environmental team, dedicated to our sustainable practices, and that's ensuring that we're compliant on construction permits. If we're building a new farm, we meet all the regulations, not only at the state but local level, permits, CAFO permits, environmental permits, construction design statements. And so I think, there's that bucket of the regulatory compliance that we all abide with. You have your set of rules and regulations. But I think too, what also is very unique is we have 600 production partners that are independently own and operate their own farm in a partnership with us. So on the finishing side of the business. And the majority of those guys also are row crop farmers. And so it's really this big push for them to be as efficient and sustainable as possible as well, because the nutrient that the animals are providing are going right back out on their cornfields, and then that corn's growing again to come back through the co-op and the feed mill to come back to the hog barn. So those guys are extremely diligent. All manure management and application records are up to date on farms. We continue to look for alternative options, whether it's, I know in the state of Iowa where I live, a lot of guys have gone to cover cropping after manure application and things of that nature. So it's really, we talked about the environment and the regulatory side, the compliance and application side and the efficiency is really a way of life for a lot of our farmers. Because as you guys all are aware that the beef side, pork side, poultry side, and row crop side, there's not a lot of margin in it today. But if you do it all together in conjunction of, being responsible at raising your livestock, being responsible with your nutrient management plans, and you put it all together in kind of one package, you can create quite a sustainable little farm for you in Western Iowa. So I think, that's the focus is making sure that we meet all regulatory, we're compliant at all times, but then really going above and beyond with how can we be as resourceful as we possibly can? How can we use our manure application to be as responsible as we can? And then, how can we bring that back around as the holistic approach of putting it back into the co-op, the feed mill, back out into the pigs in the barn.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Josh. Really appreciate those perspectives. Hey, Max, can I get you up now? And we got a few questions for you and really interested in hearing your perspectives.
Sure. How are you?
Good, Max. I'm trying to do this whole thing off my phone, so bear with me.
No worries.
So Max, let's to get started with your thoughts. How do you maintain a culture of care in your family's feedlot business, and how is this culture of care and animal welfare as a topic important to your operation?
Well, the culture of care, to me, it starts at the top, right? So if you're not implementing that and making it an important part of really every decision that you make, then it's not going to get translated down any lower than that. No one's going to care about it. You're not going to measure it. You'll have some level of care that they care about themselves, but it won't be necessarily to your standards or to you what you want. To me, the culture of care not only extends, not only like Josh had said, not only just past the animals, but everything that you do, your employees, the land that you take care of, all of it. So for me, I kind of think of the culture of care in somewhat as being a servant leader, and the fact that you are putting that animal or that employee or that piece of ground before your own needs. And then at the end of the day, we're all better off for that.
That's fantastic. Yes. And so obviously, this is very complex, right? And there's no black and white solution or one golden, ticket in terms of figuring that out and how that works across all operations, right? So what unique challenges come with building a culture of care within a family business, and how do you suggest navigating them?
So the first one for our family business is you have both on-farm and off-farm people. And so let's just take my family's business, for example. We have first, second, third, and now we're getting into fourth generation. Some of the fourth generation people and even some of the third generation people have been involved in the farm, but they've maybe never worked at the farm. They don't know what it takes to necessarily go out there and take care of the animal or take care of the farm ground, any of that. So how do you translate that and let them know what being an Ursic in this particular case means? What does that culture of care mean? The other part is there is some generational differences on the culture of care. There is some different expectations between what my uncle's or my dad's expectation is as opposed to what some of my millennial cousins' expectations are. So how do you translate that? How do you get that? For me and for us, we've kind of set up a family vision and mission, and we believe that that's the way that we need to operate it. And it still comes back to constant communication, making sure that culture of care is reflective in everything that you do as much as you possibly can, making sure that you reinforce it with whoever your leaders are that can help continue to go down the path. The other part that I would say makes it that defining piece is kind of what Dr. Hagefort was speaking at the beginning, is not only do we have a culture of care for what that means for me and my family, now I have different cultural backgrounds and expectations as to what a cultural form of care will mean. So how do I get that engagement from, in this case, from that employee on defining that culture of care? It's a challenge. There is no, I'll say that we've made as many steps as we go forward. We probably go backwards on some other ones. So, but it is a constant challenge. But I think staying the course, being due diligent, investing in having people go to different ag alliances and trainings and getting to hear what other people do, that's the best way to navigate it, and being constant and proactive with it.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you, Max. So final question I've got for you is, again, this idea that animal welfare, right, it doesn't, or the culture of care, it doesn't live within the vacuum alone of animal welfare. And so the approach may extend to that of being a good neighbor, right? And just wondering, again, as we talked about animal welfare and environmental sustainability, just wondering what advice you have for ensuring positive relationships, not just within our communities, but also with our neighbors, as that extends within this culture of care.
Number one, I would say, is be proactive. So think ahead of the curve, what that means for you. That's the biggest piece, I think, right there, is be proactive. The second part I think of is to be involved. So be involved in your local community, support local events. And when I use the term community, I'm going to also say within your region as well as your industry there. I don't think it stops. It kind of goes back to that servant leadership, right? Be a leader, be out there, put the needs of the industry that we work in and your employees ahead of yours. And the third one I would say is be community educate and outreach. I would say that there's not really anything that we do that's necessarily a big trade secret or a secret. So educate people, let them know. It's amazing how many people, even in rural America, still really don't know where your food comes from or what it comes, how it gets there. And so educating individuals, getting them out to the dairy farms or out to the ranches to see what everybody does, how we take care of our animals, how we take pride in what we do. All of those are extremely important.
Wonderful. Wonderful suggestions, Max. Thanks so much. So why don't we go ahead and have all the panelists come back on. I'm going to try and see, looks like we've got a few questions, but I can go ahead and get started with one for you, Dr. Let's see. Got a couple here for you to just bring some of those concepts back up that you spoke about earlier today, and then I'll jump over those Q&As. But so one thing we talked about again is being able to make sure that animal welfare benefits when we're able to focus on coaching, right? Coaching with our employees and workers. And I'm wondering, and part of that coaching, you talked about confidence and being able for employees to be very comfortable, especially when we think about animal welfare. That tends to be a very sensitive and critical area. So do you have any suggestions, or from your experience seeing some successful strategies in how we can help make sure that employees feel comfortable reporting animal welfare concerns immediately?
Yeah, it all goes back, like you just said, to confidence. I think if people have confidence in what it is that they do with animals, if they understand animal behavior, you know, how an animal is going to respond to that pressure that we put on an animal, whatever it is that we're doing, bringing them to the parlor, loading them in a truck. If people understand herding behavior, because that's in the case of cows, that's what it is. If they understand herding behavior and they're confident that they can approach that 1,500-pound animal without getting hurt in the process, they get more confident about what it is that they do, right? Then they also are confident to see, and those of us that have worked with animals all our lives, I mean, I can stand a mile away from, a mile is a long distance, but I can stand a long ways away from the corral of animals and see people work animals, and I can see when they're doing it right or when they're doing it wrong. It's very obvious. So there's that confidence. If people, employees, truly understand what it is that they're doing when it comes to these animals, they would also have the confidence to speak up and say, wait, you know, you don't have to be in that pen with 50 people trying to get one cow out. If you understand herding behavior, just one or two people can get that job done, doing it right. And so you can step in with confidence and instruct or teach those that are doing it at that point in time. Or you can also walk to your superior and say, wait a minute, you know, these guys, I saw today what they were doing, and I tried to explain how to do this, but it didn't go over real well. And so that confidence works both ways, both working with the animals, but also being able to speak up and say, wait a minute, this is, you know, there's an easier or a better way to do this. And if we did it this way, we would do the same thing with less time, with less energy, and much less stress on the animal.
Great perspectives. So got another question that came up, and Josh, I'll hand this one to you. And this one's a very relevant one right now. So given our current situation with COVID-19, do you have advice about how we can care for employees and animals and share that commitment with the public? I'm not hearing you, Josh.
Oh, there we go.
There you go. Thanks.
You know, a couple of the things that I think we can do, and I'll start around the employee side of this is it's, you know, one thing that we implemented early in this pandemic was, you know, if you don't feel well, just stay at home and you know, protect yourselves, but also that protects the other people from the farm or around you. And so it was really, you know, taking the approach of if something's not right, we'll figure out how to cover, we'll figure out how to manage through this. You take care of yourself, take care of your family, and recover as soon as possible. And so I think, you know, just really putting the employee first, allowing them to feel comfortable that if they're able to have, you know, a phone call with their leader and say, hey, something doesn't feel right, I have a cough, I have a fever, and then just being courteous to them and putting, you know, kind of some steps in place that you know, follow right along with the guidelines of the CDC and local and regional healthcare is, you know, let fevers clear 72 hours before returning to work, get tested, have your 14 days down if you were positive, things of that nature. And so it really was just allowing those people the comfort and confidence that, you know, we're here for you. We're going to be here when you come back to work. Please take care of yourself and take care of your family. And so then that comes, you know, what happens if multiple people are out at the same time, and how do you cover things and still continue to keep your employees safe while keeping your animals safe? And so we really went through kind of a day-to-day. This was a living plan that the COVID-19 task force, I would say, that we have at the company worked through on how do we handle this. And so we really just kind of sat down and walked through scenarios until we got what we thought was a plan on how to cover labor and manage through a situation like this. So I think really the best answer to all this is early on in this, we went through a process and assigned a task force of people for specific things around what happens for animal care when we have people out, what happens to the people, and allowing those people then, you know, to have the decision-making power on here's what's going to work best. And then we as a general management group and employees carry that message forward to all the people and farms that we impact, that, hey, here's what we're going to do. It might not have been perfect. We learned a lot the first couple of weeks and had to shift course based on guidelines, but it really came down to just a living, breathing document that had to be altered on a day-to-day, and now it's more of a week-to-week basis, but it was a living document that had to continue to evolve, and still does have to evolve, unfortunately. But I would say that was the best approach we did, and so far we've been able to manage through it. Employees are well cared for, and the animals then have also been managed through this time.
That's really great. And the other part to that question was kind of sharing that commitment with the public. Have you all found any strategies and how to do that effectively?
We've shared some of it with you know, with our local public. Obviously, people have questions, concerns, a lot around the packing side of the industry we're in today, and so you know, there's been a lot in the news about the packing side of things, and our message continues, you know, to be that we're really trying to feel our way through with human safety as the top priority. So that message has been coming out loud and clear, I think, from not only the pork industry, but also the company at the mash offs, that we want everybody to be safe and we want everybody to operate in a safe manner, so we can get back to business as usual, whatever that may be in the coming months. It may never get back to business as usual. We all hope that, but you know, that's the stance, is we want everybody to be safe so we can continue to get back to business.
Absolutely. Thank you, Josh. I've got a question for you, Max. So while servant leadership is kind of self-defining, what key character traits would you say a servant leader has to have?
First key character trait I would say is they need to be humble. They need to be willing to lead from behind and not have to be up front. Second character trait I would say is they need to have empathy. So they need to be able to show that they care, be able to kind of put themselves in that person's shoes. How would they feel about it? That kind of character trait. I'm not sure that's a real good definition of that, but and then finally, they need to, I don't know if it's a character trait, but they kind of need to feel like they belong to a higher purpose. And what I mean by that is they need to feel like what they're doing belongs to something else. And I wrote it down, and Dr. Hagefort said it the best, is connecting the why and the what. They need to be able to do that and really feel that, not necessarily just feel it. It needs to kind of be part of their their DNA, their kind of inner being. That's why they do what they do, is that reason. So.
Right. Thank you, Max. And again, that goes back to all the points made by the panelists, right? Where again, retention rates are not as high as we'd like them. And so a lot of efforts go in, right, to when we finally do hire people and they're the right ones, they've got all of those right traits, that we keep them, right? And that they actually enjoy what they do and they do it well every single day. Yeah.
Yep.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And next question here we've got, it says, Dr. Hagefort spoke to the shifts in employees within the dairy industry. Can the other speakers comment on any shifts that they are seeing within the pork and beef industries? Are you seeing similar shifts like the increase in foreign labor and other spoken languages? So Josh, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you first on that one.
Sure. I don't know if we're seeing necessarily a shift in labor, but we're seeing a need for labor is kind of how I describe it. And we're finding that a lot of ways through, T and visa worker programs, things of that nature. But I would say that labor is a big part of the conversation on a daily basis. And I would continue to think that, our visa work programs are going to be a big part of the labor force that we have, pork, beef, poultry, whatever that may be, in the coming years. And the one thing I think that I would say is, kind of changing is really how do we adapt to that when you think about the pork industry in a Midwestern, type environment, right? A lot of Iowa, Nebraska, Illinois, Missouri production bases. And so it's really finding ways that we can integrate those people into our culture and communities, through the visa program. And so we've continued to work towards that and continue to look for, opportunities to get those employees involved in our business. And what we're finding is as we do, they're very good and very loyal employees. So I think that's a big part of what I think people have to understand is if you can integrate them into your workforce, they're very good employees for a long period of time. So I would say we're constantly evolving on the employee front.
Absolutely. I've seen a lot of success through those visa programs as well on the beef side. Max, any thoughts to add there?
Can I mute myself there? I would kind of echo what Josh had said, is that I can't really tell you whether the demographics are changing from as far as cultures. What I can say is the demographics are changing from an age perspective, and that it's harder to find good, experienced managers. That they just don't really, I'll be honest, I don't really know that they exist. They're extremely difficult to find. And so a lot of the best way to do it is to kind of what everybody's been saying, is find the employees that you like, train them, develop them in your culture of care so that they're ready to take on those succession roles and those leadership roles later on down the road. I will say that there's also kind of been a trend. There is becoming more of a trend anyway towards more like robotics and some of those kinds of stuff, and that's probably a hard trend. I don't see that's going to change anytime soon at all. So
Sure. Dr. Hagefort, I've got a really great question for you. And this person wants to know your view on monitoring animals and people with cameras. And you talked about different approaches and training perspectives there. And so they want to know, can recorded video be used for training and continuous improvement as opposed to those gotcha kind of activities? So what are your thoughts in monitoring animals and people with cameras?
I think they're great tools. And again, I mean, you pointed out already, it is not about gotcha. It is about being able to see how people really understand. Like I just said a minute ago, I can stand quite a ways away from a corral where people are working animals. And I can tell by how the animals are responding or by how the people are responding if they understand what is going on. And so they're great educational opportunities. I've got video that I've taken that I use for training, even with the permission from these folks that I video, just to illustrate and demonstrate how to maybe do it differently instead of trying to chase cows all around the corral. using that herding behavior to let her actually walk out or, where we want her to go. And so it goes to understanding how a cow is going to respond and why a cow or the pig or what it is that, or what we're talking about, whatever animal it is, using that animal's instinct, innate behavior in our benefit. If we understand that, we're in a much better place. Let the animal work for you instead of trying to working the animal. And that is on the beef side, it's on the pork side. And it's something that does not come easy. It's something that takes a long time to develop, to be able to understand what goes on in the mind of that animal and be able to anticipate what an animal is going to do based on his or her behavior, right? On its behavior. And if we can anticipate what an animal is going to do based on its innate or its natural behavior, we can just let the animal do the work. So I think they're great tools. I use them. They can be used very beneficially. Of course, there's drawbacks on it, but we all know and understand that. But I look at the positive side, how it can be used.
Absolutely. And I think it goes back to what we all talked about earlier, that those videos, and sometimes just having a worker see themselves interact with those animals, it doesn't just illustrate the how and the what, but the why. And we can really help illustrate a lot of those principles. So
Absolutely.
Thank you for that. Okay, Hannah, I've got 1 minute left, and we've got lots of great questions still here. Do I have the reins to keep going? Do our panelists still have another couple minutes to answer a few questions?
We still have a lot of people on the line, so as long as you guys are okay for another few minutes, as everyone does know, everything's being recorded. So if you do have to jump off and then want to circle back and watch later, that will be available to you. But if you guys don't mind going on for a few minutes, we still have quite an audience.
Michelle, I have on one of the questions, Kay asked about the current COVID situation and advise how we care for employees. If I may maybe add one more comment to that question.
Of course.
I think Max and Josh did a great job in answering that question, but I think also it's important to realize if we're talking about foreign-born labor and linguistic challenges, maybe a lack of education. One thing where I really see an opportunity for owners, for managers, for extension in role that I play is an educational role. As we learn more about this virus, the respiratory virus, as we learn more about it, its behavior, what it does, what it doesn't do, I think there's a really critical role for us to not instill fear, but to talk about what we do know about this virus, what it does and doesn't do. So that employees, because of these challenges, linguistic challenges, and others, they may not understand what this virus is. Do some of the employees, some of these young kids that have come across that are working now in agriculture, do they know the difference between, say, bacteria and a virus? Do they know what that virus will do? Do they know how it compares to a regular flu virus? Do they know those kind of things? As we learn more about this virus, I think there is a unique opportunity for those of us in agriculture that are in this role of teaching and educating and sharing and building, our employees and our businesses to really talk about as we learn. And we're all in this process of learning more about COVID-19, which I didn't know anything about 6 or 8 weeks ago. I knew something about coronaviruses because we have those in livestock. But as we learn about this particular one, I think we have a unique opportunity and an obligation to share it with our employees and talk about those things as we learn. I just think that I wanted to add that to that. And I can't wait for our governor to lift the lockdown so that we can actually go out and maybe in a different setting that we used to do before, that we can go out to these farms and actually sit down, even if it is social distancing and whatever is needed, to sit down with those employees and have a conversation about this, a one-on-one, about what it is that we're dealing with, and not to fear this, but maybe respect this virus and how to learn to live with it as we go forward.
Absolutely. And those are some really important thoughts there, right? Because that's kind of what we're going through in society with everything else, right? we're trying to learn and adapt and do what's right. And as Max said earlier, constant communication is something that's really essential to keep our employees, again, not just in line with the vision and the commitment, but to keep them empowered and know that they matter too. And so thank you for bringing up that very important point, because we're all currently doing that ourselves, right, in society. So I'm going to go look back at the question box. So the next one, guys, is for Josh and Max. And says here, with the closures of slaughterhouses and wanting to be transparent, how do you address the questions of what is happening to these animals that are ready to ship? Josh, maybe you can start with that.
Sure. And so, yeah, there's been a lot of conversation, a lot of questions, I guess I'd say, about what are we going to do with the livestock that can't make it to slaughter. To date, we have not had to euthanize any animals. I know that's the top of everybody's list. There's been multiple facet approach to this on part of the task force at the MASH office on how do we continue to keep pigs being weaned out of sow farms, put them into barns that potentially should have already had market animals moved out of it, to packing plants, things of that nature. The first thing I would say is the way that we've been handling is there's been a huge team effort between the packing industry and the producers on how can we and what can we do for one another to not have to euthanize these animals and continue to get them in the food chain. And so we've changed some diets to back up, to slow growth down, add a lot of fiber back to diets just to keep pigs from putting weight on. And then again, looking for available opportunities to move pigs from a site to another site so we can continue to wean out of sow farms and get other barns filled up. But the end goal is for us to continue to search for strategic ways inside the pork industry, inside of our business, to get all those pigs to market. Mass euthanasia is the very last resort. And like I mentioned, so far to date, we at the MASH office have not had to execute that measure. We've been very nimble, very flexible, and I would say that the teamwork aspect of the pork industry as a whole has really helped us through this time. The past, really, I'd say 4 weeks. I look for it to continue for probably an extended period of time, longer than maybe we even think. But we'll continue to search for every alternative to ensure that while there are short supply, it seems kind of crazy to talk about that euthanasia aspect, but our goal is to search for every opportunity in every avenue we can to get those pigs into the supply chain some way or another.
Thanks, Josh. And that is such a hard topic, and it's such a heartbreaking situation. And I know there's been lots of wonderful resources being available to all producers to, again, help them communicate with the veterinarians and with experts to help ensure that if this step needs to be taken, that it's done humanely, but also resources for our people, because that severely impacts all of the workers that have raised those animals every single day, right? And so just want the audience to be aware there's lots of great resources out there to help support, again, those that interact with the animals and the animals themselves. Max, do you have any additional thoughts to add there?
Just a little, it's a little different in beef, but we are doing the ration slowdowns, trying to not put on the weight, some of that kind of stuff. There has been a movement here probably in the last week or so to do like a set aside, kind of set them aside to try to get some sort of reimbursement. We'll see if that actually goes anywhere and gets approval or not, but just to kind of slow them down. We realize it is we don't want to continue to fatten them up and feed them up if we unnecessarily. So at the end of the day, we all want to make sure that the animals get to market, that they're taken care of, and that they're treated humanely their entire life. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Let's do one more, the last question there. I think that'll help us end on a positive note. So I'll let you do that last question, Michelle, and then we'll wrap things up.
This one on top. Okay. So Dr. Hagefort, I'll hand this one to you. So it says consumers are concerned about animal welfare, and many state that it can influence their purchase decision at the shelf. How do you recommend bridging the gap with consumers around animal welfare? As I don't think there's an awareness on the culture of care.
Boy, that is a, that's the $1 million question right there, right?
Right.
And I think, we all realize and understand how far consumers are away from where their food is produced, right? And we sometimes use that as an excuse, and I don't think it's an excuse. But I also think that a lot of farmers, dairymen, pig farmers, hog farmers, on the beef side, are doing a marvelous job of not just looking at how do we produce stuff, but are coming out of their corner and talking about what it is that they do. Here at the Animal Ag Alliance, at the summit, there's been a history of bringing farmers to talk about what it is that they do. Here, this panel brings farmers to the forefront to talk about what it is that they do, so that folks that have a genuine interest, not a genuine interest in an agenda to put down animal agriculture, but a genuine interest to learn about where their food comes from, that they can actually learn. This word transparency, we always talk about being transparent. A lot of producers never thought, maybe a generation back, that they would have to open the barn doors to show what it is that they're doing, because they figured we're producing human food and we're producing it in a what they believed a sustainable way, and we, we're much further along as we are today than what we were back then. Now we open barn doors. We've learned to communicate. A farmer may not always be the greatest communicator, but they got a great story to tell. And so I think that they are learning how to tell that story to the folks in their family, to the folks in their community, to the folks at large. And so that communication is critical, is absolutely critical to show people. Also about, when we're dealing with cows, we're talking about 1,500-pound animals that can hurt us if we don't do things right. So it's not always about that cow. It's also about the employee and that interaction, as I talked about, to do things right. And so if the consumer understands how these things work and learn about that through communication, and I think that is what the industry as a whole is learning, how to do that, communicate and do that correctly, properly, and engage with the consumer at that level. There's a lot of consumers out there. It's a large number, and there's only very few of us. But we're learning, and I think social media is a great tool. You look around and see how many farmers are actually out on social media doing these kind of things, taking the risk, to be attacked in the process, but still being out there advocating for agriculture. I think it's a huge opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Hagefort, Max, and Josh, for taking the time. You all are busy, and your expertise is just greatly appreciated, but mostly thank you all for what you do to uplift the workforce, feed the world, and uphold animal welfare commitments. So thank you so much.